Our speaker today is one of the new instructors at the Art Center, Christine Di Staola, and I'm learning how to pronounce her name properly. She is Italian descent and spent many years, which you'll hear about, in Italy. So Christine received her Bachelor of Fine Arts from the Miami University in Ohio and lived and worked in Italy until 2016 when she returned to the United States to obtain a Master in Fine Arts in painting and printmaking from the University of Miami, Florida. I found that interesting, the Ohio and the Florida University of Miami connections. She was awarded a full scholarship and teaching assistantship there. She has exhibited extensively and won several awards in Florida, and her paintings and prints have been selected for numerous national juried exhibitions in galleries across the United States, including the, and I'm not sure if I'll pronounce this, Zhao B Center in Chicago, the Manifest Gallery in Cincinnati, and the Ellington White Contemporary Gallery in Fayetteville, North Carolina. There she received first place in the Immersed in Abstraction juried exhibit. She had her first international solo show in Italy at the Saletta Paolini Nezzo in Urbino, and recently she was invited to exhibit her work at the, and this is a South Korean art exhibit, so it's Gongju Invitational Art Exhibition at the Limlip Art Museum in South Korea. Her work is collected privately in the United States and around the world. Her paintings and prints have appeared in online galleries, as well as in video and print publications, including Studio Visit magazine in the winter of 2018 and 2019. She currently resides, and is it Clearwater, or did you move again since this bio?
I'm very close to Dunedin, but I'm still in Clearwater.
Okay, so she's currently residing in Clearwater and teaches at the University of Tampa and also is an instructor at the Dunedin Fine Arts Center. So Christine will be our speaker today, and before she talks, Sarah, I think, has a couple things to say about the Sterling Society, who is the host organizer for these events. So Sarah.
Thank you very much, Diane. So Christine, we want to say thank you to you for being here. You're the reason, I would say, that we're all here, and I thank you so much for that. I'd like to thank our Coffee and Conversations program sponsor, Diane Wheatley Gelati. Diane, we're always so happy to see you. We do appreciate your sponsorship, which helps defray the cost of everything that is involved in presenting this program in the Zoom format. Diane was also instrumental in the formation of the Sterling Society back in 2004 and 2005. She drafted our bylaws, and she also served as president of DFAC on the board of directors. She provided leadership as the chair of the Creative Visions Capital campaign that enabled us to build the Flack East Wing of the Art Center. And you walk down that hallway, I do believe, when you're going down towards the children's area. Diane, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Diane, we do thank you so very much for this. Diane, and then Diane, the other Diane, that our host, has done a wonderful job this year. We're coming to an end very soon, but she has done such a great job and took on this awesome job for us, and has done it all year, talking to all the artists. Actually, kind of jealous. She gets to talk to everybody first, so that's her job. But I would now like to turn it back over to Diane, and everyone enjoy.
Okay, thanks, Sarah. And some of you probably know Sarah is the president of the Sterling Society. She wouldn't necessarily say that herself, but she is our current president. So I'm just going to go over a couple of things. It looks like everybody has stayed muted upon entry, which is what we ask you to do during the conversation. And if you do have questions that arise during the presentation, you can type them in the chat area. I'll be sort of monitoring that as the presentation goes on. And Christine has indicated that she's going to break her presentation up maybe into a couple of segments and allow for question and answers before she transitions to a different aspect of her history and life as an artist. So there'll be some time for Q&A maybe in the interim of her presentation. So I think that is about it. We've got about half of the people that registered and frequently people to check on later. But I'm going to now introduce Christine, who's the instructor at the Arts Center. And I know we have some of her students here that are going to take advantage of this opportunity to see more of her works and hear about her life. So I'm going to mute myself. And Christine, I've got the screen share mode ready. So whenever you're ready to pull up yours, and I'm going to mute myself and catch you later. Okay, everybody, welcome, Christine.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put this on screen share real quick, just to try and avoid any kind of glitches. I'm going to pull down this, and Diane, you let me know if there's anything happening that I need to be aware of while I'm doing this. Okay. Thank you everybody for coming. First of all, it's nice to have a turnout. You know, I'm not somebody that everybody knows. And so to have such a nice audience, you know, from the get-go is really, really nice. I'd also like to give out a personal shout of thanks to the Sterling Society and the Dunedin Fine Arts Center, and to Diane Wheatley Gigliotti for letting all this happen. This was sort of unexpected and pleasurable surprise. Okay, so you've all gotten a nice little background about me, so I'm going to sort of just jump right in. The title of this is neither here nor there, because I still feel like I'm in a transition. As you have read, I lived quite a long period of time in Italy after graduating from Miami University in my undergraduate way back in the end of the 80s. I had a degree in fine arts and a degree in Italian. And I took advantage of both and studied there for 1 year, one summer actually, with as part of my degree program, and enjoyed the experience so much on so many different levels that after graduation, after my parents had left, I, with my cap and gown still on, walked to the travel agent and bought a ticket to go back on my own and do my own thing. And part of that involved it was basically threefold. I think part of it was just to go and see the actual art that I had seen in my art history books, you know, and in the slides. There was so much that I wanted to actually go and visit. And another part was, you know, to just improve my speaking skills in Italian and learn more about the culture of, you know, being in it, not just being there for a short period of time. And the last part was to, I think, do what everybody likes to do. And that's just go abroad and sketch things and write things and so on and so forth. And so I ended up, I actually also, just as a side, I ended up also doing a painting program that had been organized by the School of Visual Arts in New York in this wonderful town right here, if I can. Yes, Italy is going to be the first part. I will, as you've been warned, I will break from time to time to see if you have any specific questions. And then of course, at the very end, you can all come back and talk to me then. This is where I was, Urbino. And Urbino is in the Marche region, and it is along the east coast. Urbino itself is nestled in the hills, not quite on the seashore. And this is where I studied the first time, and just like all good chickens, I went back to the roost, you know, when I went back on my own. I traveled around quite a bit, looking at things and so forth, but ended up back in Urbino to do the painting program and also to just start doing my own thing with my art. Anybody who has done, you know, a bachelor's program in fine arts, or way back in the day, you get a lot of everything, but then all of a sudden you're just kind of pushed out. And where do you go? What do? You know, you don't have any assignments or anything that you have to do. So I started basically where everybody starts. I started sketching. I would wander around the town, and with those, you know, 10 words of Italian that at the time I could only use, I would talk to people, but I would just sit in the shadows there and sketch. So I had sketchbooks full of these little squiggles of people. And some of them, believe it or not, actually sold. People would love. Italians are very, very friendly and very curious, not to say nosy. And would always come up and say, "What are you doing? You know, who is that?" And so on and so forth. And one day a couple came up and actually loved them so much they bought maybe 8 or 9 little sketches. And the husband in the end thought that they hadn't paid me enough and went to the local art store and bought me $300 worth of art supplies and just brought them to me. It's one of my wonderful stories, you know, of where I was. So anyway, I sketched around the city, and I would walk around, and I was always whatever, you know, basically whatever caught my eye, whatever I was able to, you know, to grab and sketch at the time. I was pretty much enthusiastic about anything that I saw or did. I also, you know, eventually wandered outside of Urbino and would sketch things, landscapes and things that I saw, that were the beauty of nature. Anybody who's ever been to Italy or even watched programs, it is every bit as beautiful and stunning as you see. Sometimes I would go out just with pencils and sketch, shadows and light. This is part of a series of skylines, I guess I could call them. I would be fascinated by the hills and the dark shadows and bright lights. And also here, I would wander off into somebody's, cornfield or something, and the farmer would come out with his dogs or with a cup of coffee and ask me what in the world I was doing and did I want to have a cup of coffee and meet the wife, sort of thing. I also began using watercolor for the first time, and I used it basically to do very quick sketches. Like I said, I would walk around and whatever grabbed my eye was something that interested me. And at the end of this period of doing all these sketches, I actually had amassed enough to have a show. And as Diane said, I had my first solo show in Italy at the Saletta Paolini Nezzo of these landscape drawings and photographs. I see photographs and watercolors. From Urbino, I went down the road. I wasn't quite ready. How can I put this? Most of the time I had to be there in the summer. I could only stay for about 6 months at a time. I didn't have a visa that allowed me to stay there longer. So I would usually go back to the United States in the winter and work. And in the summertime, or in the nicer months, I would go to Italy and do my things. And at one point, I actually ended up here. This is San Bartolomeo di Gaifa. This is a farm, believe it or not, on top of one of the many hills outside of Urbino. It was built in the 1600s. And in exchange for working on the farm, I was given room and board. So I spent that first summer, and then many consecutive summers after that, I would spend a month or two, picking grapes, and with a scythe, I would cut hay, and I would pick olives, or I would do all kinds of things. This is 20-year-old me amongst the cows. I also took care of the cows, and I learned how to milk them, how to make butter, cream, cheese, yogurt. And I actually planted wheat, harvested wheat, and milled wheat into flour with which I made bread. So for a 20-year-old, that was a really interesting experience. And the time, a lot of the time was spent working, but there were hot hours of the day where the family would usually go in and rest, and I would take my sketchbook and I would go out and I would sketch the things that I saw. And again, these are what I call the portable years. I basically had a backpack and a duffel bag, and that's how I traveled for 6 months out of the year. So I couldn't do much in the way of large or complete paintings, but I did do a lot of this searching and sort of documenting where I was and what was happening. And just revisiting these, to me, is just a joy. So there, if you can tell, those are my cows on the one hand, and on the other side is the tractor with the hay wagon hitched up to it. This is some of the buildings up north that I did. And as I mentioned, it was kind of tough to find a lot of downtime to do more in-depth work. But one year I actually did stay up through December. I don't know how I managed to do that, but like I said, this is back in the day when you used to be able to call the airlines and just change your flight date without having to worry about anything. So I remember the one year I actually postponed my flight date, and November on the farm was, after the olive harvest, was quiet time. All the things sort of settled down. The days were very short. The light was cool. The sun would be low on the horizon. And I actually got into, this is a watercolor. This is actually quite big. I would wander outside and pick things out that I thought would make good paintings, and I took them back, and I could actually spend long periods of time working on them. So I started developing my watercolor skills, something that has never left me. I don't get to do it as often as I would like, but these works here form the basis of another series of exhibits that I did, this time back in the United States. I think I had 3 or 4 exhibits of some of the watercolors that I did. And at this point, this is where there's a major shift in my living arrangements in Italy. I actually obtained a work visa, and I was allowed to work in Italy. So I no longer went back to the United States to work in the winters. but I was in Italy. So I had to get the classic, day job that every artist gets. And to make a long story much shorter than I care to make it, I spent many years developing my skills, both in speaking and translating, and ended up working the university circuit as a lecturer. And although this took me away from my art in a certain sense, it really opened up an avenue for me in teaching. I began incorporating projects, anything creative, to stimulate the students who at that time were unbelievably bored. I jumped into the classroom and these kids were just dead bored. So I came up with these wonderful projects that combined visual elements and hands-on creation that stimulated not just speaking. When you make something, you're more inclined to talk about it as opposed to, try and remember what the teacher told you to say. But it also got them sort of jump-started their brains into thinking about different ways to approach, I'm just going to say self-expression, whether that be art or, language. So anyway, this sort of many years of doing this culminated in me teaching classes that are called content learning integrated language, where you get students to study a subject in a different language. It's not a language course, it's something else. And I was using art as a vehicle. And it got to the point where I had the classic epiphany and I was like, wait a minute. For me, it was no longer about teaching language, it became teaching art. And I made the decision to come back and get a master's degree so that I would be able to and be qualified to teach art. So that brings us to my last place of residence in Italy, where I stopped teaching almost altogether and began to dedicate myself to art and creating portfolio. And this is Santa Marina Alta. This sits in the middle of a park that is protected by the European Union, believe it or not. And this is the view off of my back terrace. So every morning I would open my windows and see this, either covered with snow or full of, green leaves and wheat fields. And this is where I began to prepare my portfolio. So my apologies if I give you a few snapshots of the house, but these were my flowers on my balcony. And this was some of the fruit and vegetables from my garden. So I think I include these for a couple of reasons. One of which being, to show you this was the way I lived. These are the things that I did. This wasn't just, something that in passing. And a second one is kind of to show you the beauty and the color and the tactile. Really, all your senses are involved when you're living in Italy. The beauty and the flavor and all of that is just so strong. In particular where I was living, So surrounded by all of this, I began to work on my portfolio and I started, at the usual spot where I was and what was around me. And so I dug out the watercolors and began doing some observation. These are some olive groves at a friend's house, another olive groves that I did in black and white and pen. As the weather started to turn and you could no longer count on being able to go outside without getting caught in the rain or something, I started doing what I did years and years ago. And that's how I would find things that interested me. I'd bring them back to the house and I would, start to study them. And at this point, number one, I got back into oil painting, which I had missed so much. I can't even begin to tell you how wonderful it was to get back to oil painting. And second of all, I started experimenting with what I can call abstracted color. That's the title of one of the courses I teach at Dunedin, but it's also known as non-local color. And that is things that you see tend to have a color that we associate with them. That lemon is yellow, so that's the local color. I started looking at the shadows and the light on the walls and thinking, wouldn't it be fun if, I put this color behind it so that those red berries, were more visible against a blue background, or the green of the olive leaves had a yellowish in the background, something that would set them off. And I began to explore this almost naturally. It didn't come to my mind and then I started doing it. I just actually started doing it and was like, oh, let me follow this thread. And I took it even further. And this is in winter. So, Italy is pretty quiet in the winter. The days are very short. Where I live, there was a lot of fog, a lot of rain in the winter. So I took everything sort of indoors and, having no more flowers or fruits to paint, I had these chairs and I would set them up in the room and I would paint them. And again, these are white, beige, and gray rooms. The curtains are white, the chair is brown. The one chair is red, but and I explored the ways I could actually express all of that light and shadow in color, and came up with a very nice little successful series of chairs. I also did a little bit of figure study, basically myself and a few friends who would come by, but I started doing this at the very end of my stay. I was awarded a full scholarship to the University of Miami in Florida, and within 3 weeks, I packed up as much as I could take away with me and gave away all of my furniture, my refrigerator, washing machine, freezer, car, to friends, and left. And that brings us here. So I'll take a moment and
Christine.
stop if there's anybody who has. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I'm not sure if you were repositioning yourself, but we had a little bit of that frozen face, voice kind of breaking up a little bit. So just a teeny bit at the tail end there. But I just wanted to make you aware of it. So.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
If I need to repeat anything, or if anybody has any questions, just let me know.
Yeah, I don't understand the frozen, what happens when images freeze and what reasons. I'm not quite clear. But anyhow, I don't see anything in the chat right now. But if people do have questions that they want to ask about Christine's time in Italy, and just sort of what her experiences were there and the various images that she created, feel free. Otherwise, we can continue with the second half of her artistic world and back here in Miami. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. So Miami was a big change. And again, where I started was where I tend to usually start. You can see a distinct change in the way that I was looking at the landscape around me. Colors became extremely bright and saturated. I really began to explore color as something more than just to describe what's there. The size of my work also started to get a little bit larger, although these are kind of small. Went to the beach, took some photographs, reinterpreted, your classic beach scenes. These are some of the colors that I felt made it more interesting to me. Unfortunately, in Miami, I didn't spend much time out of doors. Number one, it's ungodly hot down there, but I was also quite busy in the studio. So my attention sort of diverted to what was there as opposed to what was outside. But even then, I was concerned a little bit with the environment and things that were around me. So I began to focus on the people and the things that I could see in the studio. These are rather dark, but interesting. These are also prints. These are not paintings. And these are my friends. I was revisiting chairs. And then I began to use that same abstracted color for the first time with the human, and looking at the women, and there were some boys, but it was basically girls that were all around me. Started exploring several avenues at once. One was, like I said, the color to describe the figure. The second one was gesture. I found it very interesting that if I took the object out of their hands, they made these really interesting gestures that could sort of be comparable to the ones that I would always see in Italy. And this became, for me, a starting point for, let's just say, a new approach to the way I would progress and started looking at.
Sorry, Christine, that breakup thing is happening again. So I don't know if your position with the microphone that's built into your computer, if there's something that's causing problems with that. It's not that we can't tell what you're saying, but there's just little intermittent things. So I don't know if you want to try repositioning your laptop or your computer. Or...
I'll try. I haven't moved anywhere, and I have the Wi-Fi right next to it. So
it's probably just technology in the building that you live in, something to do with that. So, but go ahead and there is just a comment here from one of our attendees. Anna Livingston, fine artist in the area. She says Italy must have just been endless, wonderful inspiration. So,
yes, but I could tell you stories. Most wonderful experience. I do not regret it. I would not change anything about it. It was the most fantastic thing in the world. So, all right. Well, thanks, Diane. Like I said, I'll try very hard to, keep a good position here so that you can hear me. If there's a part that you were not able to understand what I was talking about, I can always go back and revisit a slide. And is there somebody who wishes to say something? Oh, my image freezes. Okay. My apologies. Okay, I'm going to try and go again. Like I said, I'm going to sit very still here. All right, so in Miami anyways, so there was, I began working on the figure quite a bit more, keeping that same sense of color and exploring what I could do with the background. I was having quite a difficult time integrating into life in Miami. Didn't think it was going to be as hard as it actually was. But nonetheless, to me, hopefully you can see it in the colors and so forth. It wasn't depressing, it was just challenging. And at a certain point, I'd gotten so, sorry about that, so confused about where I was and what I was doing. It was coming out in my art. The backgrounds and the figures were sort of merging. Same colors, same shapes, less and less distinct. And that brings me to the very end of my Miami years, where I would spend the entire year in Miami. I would spend summers working on my paintings and developing my work. However, the final year, my mother was not well, so I went up to stay with her in Ohio, and after a couple of months, she unexpectedly passed away. So when I returned to Miami, I was in a very, very different spot. I mean, equivalent to when I came back from Italy to America and found myself in an entirely new world. This was even worse. But it had a good effect on my art, actually, because I stopped worrying so much about where I was, started focusing more on the figure and developing the figure, continuing with the same colors. That's kind of my signature. That's what I do. But I started to detach the figure from the background. The background began to read sort of like a backdrop in the theater. I think in my thesis, I called it like a one-act play, where all of the action and all of the concentration is on the figure. And in my case, the figure with these odd gestures and odd colors. The background in this is a series called The Gleaners. And my landlady's backyard was very fruitful. These are the mangoes, the papayas, and the bananas from her trees. This is The Temptation of St. Anthony. This is also a series of gesticulating figures interacting with red strings that I used for a couple of reasons. One was to sort of divide the space, the visual space of the image in a really interesting way. And then there was sort of like a subconscious sort of disentanglement or playing around with all the things that were happening around me. This is Saint Sebastian. These are the last two figures. And all of these paintings are about 3 foot by 4 foot. The scale of my paintings became very large at this point, and the figure sort of crowded into the front of the canvas. And the background was even less important. It was just an excuse to divide the space up and use color. And at this point, I was putting together my final exhibit, and I had a moment where I did what I call a palette cleanse. I just went back to having some fun with color. So I did 4 really quick paintings, one each day, where I was not concerned at all about anything except color and brushstroke. And anybody who takes my classes and I talk about alla prima painting, this is basically what I'm talking about.
Yeah, one of the
I'm not sure if
people in the
somebody
chat asked if you could speak up a little louder, and I think Roderick must have unmuted himself. Did you have a question, Roderick? Roderick? Yeah, if I was hearing some noise and somebody that's on the Zoom here, background noise in your home. So the reason we ask people to be muted while the speaker is talking is so we don't hear the background noise in your home. So unless you had a question, I'm going to go ahead and mute you again, Roderick, until we get into the Q&A.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, Christine, go ahead. Yeah, somebody asked if you could maybe speak a little bit louder. So go for it.
Again, this is where I wish we were in person so that I could actually see it on your face. This is really confusing to me sometimes not to get a physical reaction. Okay, so anyway, as I was saying, this kind of concludes the figurative work that I did in Miami. After my exhibit, I worked on two very interesting series of paintings that, again, focus on the figure and talk a little bit more about my state of mind at the time. Is there a question? Okay, wasn't sure if I heard a question.
No, I'm hearing somebody's background, and Roderick was going in and out of being muted and not muted, so I don't know if there was, I saw somebody else in his home or wherever he is, but he's back on mute right now. So unless somebody else out there that I don't see an image for has a question that they want to raise, Christine is happy to stop at some point and answer questions in the middle here. But I don't see anything on the chat, so Christine, go ahead.
All right. Well, last two series of paintings that I did in Miami before leaving are right here. And my diver series. And I think there's a sort of freedom of background and what I'll call any kind of background noise in my figures. I do have to give credit to the diving team at the University of Miami. Swimming was probably the only sport that I could practice comfortably in Miami. And after I would swim, the diving team would usually take the stage, and I'd hang around and watch them and kind of got inspired by the movements of their bodies and got permission from the coach to take some photographs and to actually make some really nice paintings of theirs.
You just answered a question I was going to ask. Were these taken, were these done from photos or live, actually viewing them? So you've answered that question. And I just see that we have a question from Katie Dietz, who's on the Zoom. She asks where you teach and do you also do workshops? So she teaches at the Dunedin Fine Arts Center. That is one of the places, but also the University of Tampa, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And as far as workshops, I'll let you go ahead and address that, whether you do individual personal workshops or so. Go ahead and respond to that question.
That's something that I'm so fresh to Clearwater, to be perfectly honest. And with COVID, it's been very hard to sort of get out and promote myself. It's something I would like to do. And if I can find the studio space to work from, or I would love to do workshops. I would love to be able to, I have such a good time teaching. One of the attendees attends one of my classes, and I enjoy it so much to watch you develop your style. Yeah, I would love to do that. So that's something I can maybe address at the very end here. But yeah, that's in the pipeline. Let's put it that way.
And just for folks to be aware, the recordings of these coffee and conversation presentations will be are being put up on the DFAC website as a YouTube presentation. So you'll get some publicity for those, Christine, who didn't catch today's, but will see that recording. I hear it and see that presentation in the future. And for others who want to kind of go back and look at it again. So it's usually posted about a week after the event. Ken Hannon at DFAC does the posting of the recordings. So
yeah, and some of this stuff I'm still talking with Sarah at DFAC about doing a few shorter workshops on just how to use color in addition to the oil painting courses that I actually teach there. And I'm hopefully going to be teaching a printmaking course that talks about color as well. So keep your eyes on the website at DFAC. for that.
Great.
Okay, so just a little bit more to show you here of my work and some of the things that I do. This is going to be abstraction. This is a small portion of my work that actually got quite a bit of exposure, strangely enough. Abstraction is when you take something that is recognizable and you abstract it. You manipulate it or you change it so that it is no longer readable as what it was. That's kind of different from non-objective, which is, just reacting and putting paint on the canvas without having any, previous thought about it. So all of these works come from pre-existing canvases that I've sort of just focused on an area and then began to work on it. These are actually prints that I did using ink on a non-absorbent synthetic paper. So you can sort of see bubbles and scratch marks and things like that. That's the application of a lot of stuff to move the ink around. And they were done mainly because I was facing some concerns of mine that I wasn't able to sort of vent in any sort of recognizable way. There was no image that I felt corresponded to what I was feeling or thinking at the time. And so I just kind of returned to the formal elements of design, color, texture, shape, line, and things like that. And as I worked through the process, I just created these as opposed to a figure or anything else. This was another one that I did actually in collaboration with one of my classes at University of Miami. The underlying work, the gestural line that you see, was part of a black and white assignment that they did. And I got permission from them and I incorporated it into my own work. And these are also prints with a lot of manipulation. So you're seeing silk screen on top of digital, stenciling, and so on and so forth. So, and this sort of concludes what was happening at Miami. So I'm just going to show you a few things that are in the pipeline for Clearwater, and then I will address any questions of any nature, at the end of this. So at the height of COVID, I came to Miami, and part of the reason is I actually sold some paintings and gave myself a holiday in Dunedin I followed the advice of a friend who lives in St. Pete and fell in love with it. And one of the first places that I actually went was the Fine Arts Center and met some wonderful people there. And I kind of thought, be nice if I could, move up to that area and maybe teach there. And thankfully that happened. So here I am. I am on the west coast of Florida, and I'm just kind of settling in, to be perfectly honest. My landlady sold the property of her first where I was living, and I had to kind of move. And it seems like I have a little bit of space here that I'll be able to start painting again. So while I'm setting that up, I'll just show you some of the stuff that's in the sketchbook. So this is some preparatory drawings for probably another series of the figures. I'm not quite sure what I'll be doing with them, but it will reflect, the situation that I think that I am in right now. And make some nice paintings that reflect on my time here. And hopefully COVID will stop being annoying and we can go back to exhibiting in person again. So there we are. That brings us to the end of the presentation. So if there's anything anybody would like to ask or see again or talk about, I'm here for you.
I have a quick question, Christine. Are these two images, are they done with live models?
These have to be done, but with photographs. My model, some of these, this one, these four right here, she moves for me to be able to capture them. So I do a lot of live study of models, and that's one thing. And then it pairs very well when I do photographs because I can kind of rely on the muscle memory of having worked from life and put it together with a photograph. Yeah.
And as a reminder to folks, you can ask questions in a couple ways. You can either type it into the chat, and I'll be looking for any questions that pop up there, or you can use this little hand icon. I just clicked on it, and you see it sitting in my image. So if you want to raise your hand, so to speak, you can use that. And let's see, I have something here from Kim Michelle. Basically, I love your work, love the colors and compositions, and would absolutely take a workshop with you when you can teach again. So that's from one of the attendees, Kim Michelle. Lots of times we don't have as many questions as we do just compliments and people loving whoever the presenter is, which always, that's never anything that you want to turn away. But if anybody else has questions, you can use the hand or the chat. So. And Roderick, you can unmute yourself now if you'd like. You seem to, we're having a little bit of in and out with your audio there, but I think you might have joined us a little bit later, but if you have questions, you're welcome to raise those. I don't know, you must have just been so thorough, Christine. I don't see any questions here, but if you certainly anybody, Diane Wheatley is, let's see. I think there's a couple of questions that have popped up here. Let me take a look. So from Susan Phillips, are you mainly painting in oils now and not watercolors? And thank you from Mavis Gibson. Just love your work and your story. Thank you. And another thank you from Diane Wheatley Gelati. So, but the question is, are you mainly painting in oils now and not watercolors?
I'm about ready to pull the watercolors back out simply because of space constraints, but I have intentions of continuing in oil painting at the same time. I think one thing that might change is the size. After I have 3 canvases that are about 3 foot by 4 foot. Once I'm done with those, I might actually shrink the size again. But no, there's something about oil paint that I can't do with any other medium. So I don't want to stop doing that. What I think I'd like to start doing, I'm sorry?
Oh, the follow-up question was, do you ever use acrylics? So you kind of went into that. Go ahead, Ellen, you've got a question there. But to answer the question from the former person about, do you use acrylics?
I didn't put any of those in here, but I did do a series of work in acrylics that was part of the portfolio. But when I got to Miami, we were sort of advised not to spread ourselves too thin. So if you were going to work in one medium, to develop a portfolio in that medium. So I kind of got away from acrylics. I don't teach anything in acrylics, but I haven't done much. So that's kind of a very contorted way to say, yes, I do paint in acrylics, but no, I'm not painting in acrylics currently.
And we have another question. She's raised her hand, but you need to go ahead and unmute yourself. Ellen Dargan-Knapp. There should be a little icon in the box there.
Yeah. Hi. I just wondered about, you had said you went to abstracting real life when you were sort of trying to get your emotions out, or just, it was just a means to, I don't know, what you were, express yourself more. And I was wondering if you're going to do some of that again. Will we see that?
Probably. That was one of those things. Again, I can't, every time I get a question, I feel like I'm talking far too much. I started doing that at graduate school, and I had a very negative reaction from one professor telling me that I was going off on a tangent, to be careful, not to get lost in the woods, and so on and so forth. And it's always a bit depressing, for me. But I persisted and I continued with it. I think one of the problems with continuing in that vein right now is I don't actually have the machinery to produce it. I used printers and presses that I don't have at my disposal. So I'm going to be sort of curtailed on that for the time being. But once I can, access the facilities again, yeah, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome to the question.
And there was a chat that I just answered from one individual, but I'll tell everybody. The question was, will this presentation be available for viewing later? Somebody wanted to share it with a friend. And so to remind everybody, about a week after the presentation, the recording is in the cloud as we are speaking. And I forwarded it to Ken Hannon, and then he posted on the DFAC's website, has a we have a YouTube for various things that we've recorded. And you just click on that YouTube icon. It's at the top banner of the DFAC.org website. So you'll be able to look at this again or share it with others. And Ellen, if your hand is still up there, do you have another question? Oops, unmute.
How do you get your hand down?
Oh, I think there's some way to lower hand. I don't know. This technology, Zoom, has just been challenging.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, lower hand. Okay, I just lowered it. So.
Oh, you. Okay.
But did you have another question, Ellen? No. I'm going to look at the chats again and see if there's anything else there. Questions about oils and watercolor. So I think, so far, I think you've answered it, everything that's been on here. Oh, well, just another compliment from Diane Wheatley Gelati. Your work is exciting, Christine, and DFAC is a winner with you as a new instructor. So,
well, one of the things that I like to do, since everybody talks about, the loveliness of Italy, I really would for us. I'd love to organize some sort of, studio course over in Italy with DFAC if they actually organize these things. I have these beautiful places that I cannot talk about enough, and the people and the food, of course, and all of that just makes for a wonderful experience to go out and explore. I really hope that can become a reality as well.
There was another question here asking if you've ever worked in fiber. That's from Katie Dietz.
I wish. I love it. I had friends who did fiber arts and had looms and everything. It's just beautiful. I've never worked with it before. I would love to.
I think we have at least one, if not two, fiber art instructors at DFAC. I know we have one who does backstrap weaving, and I think there's one who does some type of collage fiber related. So the person who asked that question, if you're interested personally in fiber arts, check the DFAC catalog for options that are there.
So. Well, one of the beautiful things again about Italy was I had friends who worked in leather. I had friends who actually, you could get everything and anything, and such a tactile experience, fabric was. It's wonderful.
And let me see, there's another chat that popped up. Oh, this is a comment from Marilyn, who I'm going to mangle the last name, Wazalewski. Acrylic is her primary medium, she is saying, and would your process work with acrylics? Her question, basically. And also, you have a website, so please make sure you provide contact information for people before we're done here.
Okay, I will do that. I'll pop it in the chat, actually. The process for acrylic is a lot different than what I use for oils, basically because just the consistency, of the medium and the way you handle it with a brush and the drying time. So no, I'd have to. Some of the things that I'm able to achieve with oil are basically because it is oil paint. It's not acrylic. I have seen some work at the Fine Arts Center, though, that is fantastic. Somebody is doing acrylic in the most beautiful way. So you might want to also check and see how they work. Did somebody have my website up? Is that what I saw?
I see it there, yes. So if anybody wants her website, you can just look at your chat button and it's got www.christine-distaola.com. But it's there in the chat modes. And I think, do you have another question, Ellen? If you want to.
Well, it follows up a little bit with working with oil. I'm an acrylic painter, and I recently have made attempts with water-based oil. I was enthralled with the color and just using the material, but it was also very challenging for me. And I said, how am I going to do this? I can't, this painting is not dry. How am I going to do this? And So I just haven't given up, but I just thought if I signed up in one of your classes, would that be then a challenge? Certainly it would be. I'd be sort of trying to do some catch up.
Would you be using the water-based oils, or would you be using your acrylics?
No, I would continue to struggle with water-based oils.
Okay.
I'm involved with it. I am interested. I haven't had that much time with it, and it's a serious adjustment. To want to keep painting when no, I better wait, and then it goes on, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get my acrylics down. Forget this. So.
Mine is the opposite, because when I'm painting, I'm trying to push the paint around and it's like, gosh darn it, it's dry. Stop drying so fast. No, you can, the courses, I've had a couple people come in and try and use the acrylic, but again, with the approaches and the things I'm teaching, the acrylic doesn't really mesh well with it. Water-based oils, I've had a couple people use some of that. I would say come in and struggle with it, because my classes are not organized to produce masterpieces, particularly neither the beginning nor the abstract color, because abstract color for so many people is more difficult than they anticipate, but it's also such a new thing to do that I think I would be remiss in trying to get you to paint something beautiful on the first go with something, all my years of teaching language, you give people the grammar and then you let them play around with it. And at a certain point, personal expression and the structure beneath it start to merge and you start to get things. That takes time. So if you were to come in, my job is to help you understand what you're doing and how to do it better. Your job is to take it where you want it to go. I'm never going to ask you to paint a certain way. I can show you a technique. If you like it, you use it. If not, you don't. Most people tend to do stuff in a particular way, and that's your way. And that's what I want you to develop. Like I said, I can show you tricks on how to mix color or ways to make paint look a certain way. It's like, how do you get that effect? I can help you with that. But it's in you're the one who says, I want it, I really like working like this. And I do my best to get you there. So,
is it a disadvantage to be working water-based rather than not? Would that be a problem? Okay.
No, I think I've never used them, so I actually asked some professors who had, and a lot of the information is that you can, to a certain degree, you can also use it with oil-based and still clean up with water. I would be curious to see how you work with them. I would be comfortable with you coming in if you'd be comfortable with the fact that I'm not proficient in them, but I'm more than willing to use my knowledge to help, work it out. Yeah, sure. Come in, join us. Yeah. It's fun.
I love your color, that you really explore color. I love color. So it's really another thing that I'd like to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I try. I don't try. It just happens. But right. I try not to overwhelm people with my color.
Okay. So I don't see any other additional questions in the chat area. And we're sort of at the end of our hour, but if anybody wants to know more, you can certainly take one of the classes at DFAC from Christine and get personally immersed in her teaching process and her art style. And I'm just getting thanks from people, really enjoyed the presentation. A couple more comments. Let me just look here. And yeah, so again, for anybody who wants to contact Christine and follow up, you can go to her website, and I presume on your website there's a place for contacting you, and it's www.christine-distaola.com. So thank you, everybody, for attending, and it looks like some people are dropping off, so unless there are other questions, just another thank you from Anna Livingston. So Christine, it's been great. I've enjoyed the prep for this beforehand, our couple little practice sessions, and hearing about Italy, and it makes me want to go back again. My time there were bicycle camping trips when I was much, much younger, but who knows, maybe I'll go back in a little higher style this time.
Okay. Well,
So, whoops, well, 2 more popped up there in chats. I'm betting they're thank yous versus questions. Wonderful, another comment, and just more thank yous from people. So, and I will share with you, Christine, I'll share the attendance names of all the people who registered. I don't know exactly who all logged on. And the chat comments, if you want, I can share those also. So just so you have information about who asked what for follow-up in case somebody contacts you and you can't remember, oh, that's the one that asked me the question in the Zoom presentation. So.
well, everybody can always, reach out through the Dunedin Fine Arts Center. And I always encourage people to just pop in and say hi, come in and look at a class and see how, see what it feels like. I'm never, there's no obligation. If it's not what you're looking for, that's fine too. But if it is, come in and have some fun.
And register for those classes.
Right.
For sure. And, a lot of times there's so much at the Fine Arts Center that I've just begun to meet, some of the other teachers and look at some of the other things that are there. There's all kinds of wonderful stuff. I would like to take some of those courses. That's, I was talking to Sarah about that. So, just this kind of broad mind classes. So that's great.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Christine, and thanks to all our attendees. I don't know if you were all on at the beginning, but this is the last Coffee and Conversation for this current quote season. We usually start up in September or October and end in May. And the reason is in the past, snowbirds that were here would be going back to their homes in the summer, so we just didn't have as much attendance when we were doing it live at the Art Center. Since we're not doing that, but we're still keeping the same pattern. So I'm in search for more artists for presentations. So if anybody in our remaining audience has suggestions of other artists that they've either been aware of around the area and would like to have present at a Coffee and Conversation, it'd be great if you let me know. I'm a volunteer in the gift shop at the Art Center on Wednesday, or you can just leave a note at the front desk to give to Diane. That's me, Diane with a Y, D-Y-A-N-N. So I'm working on the lineup for next year. So that's about it. So I think no other questions there. Thank you all so very much.